Hello there. Glad to be back with you again. Hey, just a little bit of information here. Just thought I'd throw it into this daily devotional, since many of you follow us online and follow the church online and follow the messages and so forth. I just wanted to mention that coming up in January, the 17th through the 20th, it'll be 4 nights in a row from 6:30 in the evening, West Coast time, to 8:30 at night. A very dear friend of mine, Ronnie Simon, who has been my guide in Israel. We've worked together for nearly 30 years, and he's going to be here in the States with us. He's going to be sharing at the church. And if you're not in the area, you can follow us online. If you are in the area, you're welcome to come. The only thing I have to say is we won't be offering childcare those nights. But he's going to do what we call a virtual tour of Israel. Because we have been blocked from taking groups over, Israel has once again closed their borders to all travelers, foreign and domestic. And so we thought, why don't we do this? We will have him do the tour in a virtual setting with video and projection and all that stuff, and lecture and so forth, so that you who haven't been there or maybe would like a refresher can get a chance to see what it's really like. Because we don't have any idea whether this is going to open up again in the future, and if it does, if it'll even be possible. So I invite you to follow along, check that out. If you can't do that, it will be available online at Calvary-Spokane, Calvary.com. Calvary-Spokane.com, excuse me. And so you can catch it up if you miss it. But anyway, just thought I'd give you that little bit of information. Let me get back to what I should be talking about today, and that is the fact that Paul is giving some very, very clear instructions about how to go about building a healthy marriage relationship. And one of the things we focused on Monday was the idea that it's learning how to become one in Christ, unified together in the fellowship. He said we are one flesh, and that means that basically two bodies, two peoples, two entities, carbon-based entities, have to learn how to live in a way that is one of really intense unity. There's no other relationship that is as intense and will demand as much self-sacrifice as learning how to walk in a loving relationship with somebody else. Because it takes only a short matter of time before you realize that this is a challenge, and this person you married isn't exactly what you thought. You're going to discover things about them that, try as you may and prepare as you may, you didn't see coming. And that's why most marriages end up dying after 5 years. That even explains why a lot of people just avoid marriage altogether, because they understand the sacrifice that's involved is so holistic that they would prefer to just live selfishly and take care of themselves and not have to make that depth of commitment. It's not surprising that when a young man and woman choose to live together before marriage or outside of marriage, that in 90% of the time it's the guy's idea. Because, as someone once said, he can get the milk without having to buy a cow. And so it's that lack of commitment that really dooms those relationships almost always to destruction. Because statistically, 50% of couples who live together, cohabitate before marriage, will end up divorcing if they marry. But 50% of them will never get married in the first place. So what you do is you go down to about less than a 25% chance that the marriage that you're in will succeed, because simply it began without any serious in-depth commitment. You know, I've heard people use the illustration, well, it's like test driving a car. You drive it first before you buy it. That's not even true anymore. People buy their cars online. But aside from that, the whole truth of the matter is we're not talking about a car. And I tell people all the time, if your marriage is just a piece of paper, can I have your contract to your house? Can I have your mortgage? Can I have your title to your house? Can I have the title to your car? You see, people say marriage is nothing but a piece of paper, but it's a piece of paper that represents something. And if you want to get a divorce, you have to go to a court of law, and they have to adjust the relationship. I say all of this because I think that we underestimate, and we make it a slight thing to get married, and then if it doesn't work, get divorced or shack up together before marriage. All of that is a recipe for problems of a high degree. It brings a level of grief into your life that nobody in their right mind would ever want to have to experience. So anyway, I say all of this so that we understand that unity in marriage is a key thing, and it's a hard thing to gain, but it's essential. That secondly, I talked about how it's important that we not cling to the old way of life, that we leave. And he uses mother and father, but I'm talking about a whole lifestyle that we have before we get married as a single person, and we seek to adapt our lives together as husband and wife. That too has a lot of changes. It means that I'm going to have to sacrifice certain things, give certain things up in order to make room in my life for this other person and the things that are important to them. It doesn't, now if you're in a relationship where all the other person thinks about is how they can be happy and not thinking about any of your needs, that's going to be an unhappy relationship. It's what we call a reciprocal relationship. In other words, that I bring what I bring to the marriage, my spouse brings the other part, and we find a way to make room for those things together and to share those things in a common way. So that really, as we talked about what love really comes down to, it shows a care for the other person. If I simply just want my life and my home to be run the way I want it to run, then I'm really not walking in love. It's love that looks at the other person and says, how can I bless you? What can I do to bring joy and comfort into your life? And that's really the challenge that is before us. In fact, that's essential to what Paul says to us next, that not only should we leave, but I often put it the way the old King James did, leave and cleave. In other words, the idea, he says, being united to his wife so that the two can become one flesh. So there's two sides of this. I need to let go of certain things from my past, and I need to reach out and grasp and cling to certain things in the future. And this is far more than just the sexual union as people often think about it. Now, I don't have any problem with the sexual union. I mean, sexual intimacy in marriage is like the bloom on a rose, but it's not the stem, it's not the leaves, and it's not the roots. You cannot sustain a beautiful relationship just simply with sexual intimacy. There has to be a depth of relationship. And that's why, even though it doesn't sound very romantic, I counsel young couples all the time, begin by building your relationship on Christ before you begin to build it on friendship and physical intimacy, because that will sustain you through all seasons of your life. I mean, my wife and I have been married over 50 years, and I can tell you there's times when physically and otherwise our circumstances have been that romance is the last thing in our life. It's just not that we don't like it. I mean, I love the romance, but the part is that sometimes you don't have the practical ability to be in a romantic relationship. You have to just be in a loving relationship based upon serving and sacrificing for the welfare of the others. And that's why we say in the marriage vow, through health and sickness, through prosperity and adversity, because you will have times of sickness, you will have times of adversity. There are all sorts of things that are going to interrupt and get in the way of being loving and romantic and affectionate and all those things that are the fun parts of marriage. And you have to understand that you stay committed to this other person in spite of those things. If we go into that relationship saying, I love you as long as it's pleasurable or satisfying for me, but as soon as that doesn't happen, I'm out the door. Well, you're not walking in Christ's love. You're walking in the flesh, and your relationship is more predatorial than it is relational. You're just simply seeking what you can get out of that relationship for yourself. You're not looking at the welfare of that others. I tell people all the time that marriage is not a 50-50 equation. I said what it is, it's 100% and 100%. A man needs to give 100% of himself to his wife. A wife needs to give 100% of herself to her husband. And in that way, neither one ever feels like the other is not looking out for their welfare. In a way, it's kind of like almost changing things around, where I trust for my wife that she'll look out for my well-being, that she'll be concerned about my well-being and my welfare. And she's trusting that I'll be looking out for her well-being and her welfare. And so it creates really a Christ-like dynamic of self-forgetfulness, that we stop looking around and saying, what can I do for me to make myself happy? And we begin to say, how can I bless the other in a way that honors Christ? And that's the whole idea of becoming one. But again, as I said, we're running out of time. This is a lot to think through and a lot to process for a lot of you. You may need to re-listen to this over and over again. If you want, you can read my book, The Way Marriage Was Made to Be, and that might be helpful to you as well, because I cover a lot of this in details. I have tons of stuff at the Calvary website in the archives of things that I've done. In fact, during COVID, I did a whole series called Home Remedies, and that may be helpful for you as well. I just found that my wife and I, when we began to focus on learning and growing and getting as much information as we could in building our relationship, the healthier it was and the more meaningful the conversations we had became, because we moved away from just arguing over different points of view to really talking about things that we knew we needed to understand. And it ultimately led to us reading and praying together as a couple on a daily basis, because we found that there was a lot that we needed to pray about. So anyway, we'll pick this up tomorrow. This week is going by pretty darn quick. We're getting close to the end of the year, and so I look forward to finishing this year with a big pop. God bless you. Go in His grace.